Cool. All right. And we're streaming. Welcome, everyone, to the June edition of our MacAdmin meetup, also known as WWDC Recap, even though we're in the middle of the event, but we have still plenty to talk about. Cool. Oops. I think I lost somebody there. Yeah, cool. So I guess kick things off. Mac, you found that great PDF, I'll share it in the channel, of like updates for IT folks specifically.
Yeah, that's available through the Appleseed for IT portal. So anyone with access to that can go get it.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, I recommend the release notes for the different OSs that are available over the developer portal. As far as I know, they also contain some interesting info.
Okay, cool. Behind the scenes information. Yeah, I'm curious if there's anything that jumped out to you guys right away that you saw yesterday in the keynote. That
I mean, a lot of AI. That's gonna be all right. That's gonna be a lot of people's interest. Is what are the AI features? What do they do? What's the where does the data go? What are the agreements around that? And do I have any controls over them as an administrator? Right?
Yeah. First of all, I want to acknowledge the phenomenal branding that we have with AI equals Apple Intelligence. I love it. Which AI are we talking
spotting, about? Right?
Mm-hmm. Why mess with an acronym when you already have a good one? But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what kind of like profile, what's gated behind a configuration profile that, especially on the Mac OS side.
I mean, from what I've read so far, it sounds like DDM is starting to come into its own. It's I think the last couple of releases, it's been kind of limited in what it's capable of. Henry, you could probably correct me on this, but from what I've seen so far, the idea that the new features are going to be delivered through DDM is starting to look like that's the reality.
Yeah. I mean, still lots of things missing for now, as far as I looked it up. But yeah, so I mean, the message is clear. Hey, and I also like a lot that there's also in the documentation reference already. There's some clear path how the OS might be going in terms of what even administrators cannot change in the future when iOS 15 is live. Because this whole battle, like, oh, can the people have an admin or should they have a standard account? And all of this battle is often, if they are an admin, they can turn off certain things. And I think to manage that as an enterprise or an organization or a school, there's a much better position in the new OSs.
Yeah, totally.
And for example, login items, right? I saw something about that starting to become deliverable over MDM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also saw in the what's new for IT document, they had stuff about background task management. I don't know, did you guys see that? It reads a little bit like you would be able to deploy executable scripts and launch deconfiguration files via MDM, which I guess is adding on to that whole like configuration files concept from last year. But kind of interesting what that could do for device bootstrapping. If you can just deploy an entire software bundle.
In a zip file, maybe? No PKG anymore. Oops.
Yeah, I mean, that's the piece that I'm curious about. When it says executables, it's like, in what context are they running? Can we run root agents? Yeah, how are they deployed? Yeah, that'll be interesting to play with. Also, just on just a pure like technology level, I think that thing that stuck out for me the most was the private cloud compute concept. Was such a interesting like architecture shift for cloud hosted AI. I was reading a little bit. I found an article from the Apple blog, and it was talking about how the software transparency piece of that works, which I'm still super curious about. Like their claim that any like researcher could get access to all of the binaries that are running on their cloud nodes to like pen test them, I suppose, and then verify them. It's like pretty amazing concept. I feel like in principle to not only allow that to happen, but also require it for functioning.
It is an interesting sort of transparency that Apple does not always offer.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't have that. I don't know, checking out like iCloud storage or something like that, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Something else that got my attention was some of the updates I read about to the hypervisor framework. It sounds like it's going to be probably a little more useful to us admin types. I read that you can now sign into an iCloud account within a VM, which is nifty, and also has a erase all contents and settings feature, which given that snapshots and stuff aren't really a thing on that framework, that's at least some help.
Yeah, that's interesting. It made me realize that maybe that was a pain point I hadn't run into in the past. So was that a limitation that you couldn't just kind of like wipe and restore?
Yeah, I think you were stuck with basically reinstalling the OS. I haven't worked with VMs for a while just because, for the last couple of years since the Silicon switchover, it's gotten less helpful to work with. Honestly, since we lost the ability to basically DEP enroll a VM, I haven't touched it much. That used to be a pretty critical part of my workflow for testing and enrollment, processes, onboarding stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, curious for you, Arik, was there anything that jumped out from? Well, I guess first of all, have you been to any of the sessions so far beyond the keynote?
I mean, the platforms is the only one that I've looked at so far. I thought it was super bold to rebrand AI as Apple Intelligence. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I really think they did a great job of delineating. Hey, here's stuff that's personalized to you. It stays on your device, but we'll also have some secure server stuff, and we'll also be able to send stuff to ChatGPT eventually,
right?
But only if you allow it. And it's kind of cool that, hey, if you have a subscription and want to supply your username and password, if you want to log in and associate your queries with your account, that's fine, and you can have access to the premium features. That's fine too. I thought it was really well thought out.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of reminded me a bit of, maybe this is a bad example, but in like the original iOS release, when you had so many built-in apps into iOS, like services like YouTube were just like sort of, you had a native client in iOS for that. And then that didn't scale very well, or ultimately, like Android being a competitor, they had to sort of break that out. But I'm super curious how like this integration with ChatGPT scales over time, if there kind of becomes like a fork in the road at some point where all of the iOS offered features becomes totally separate from the product that you would access online or with a paid account or something. It seems like the iOS releases are. Oh, sorry. Yeah, what were you going to say, Henry?
But I think I also heard that other vendors will come to the game as well, whatever name. I mean, OpenAI is not the only one. So yeah, I think this is just like it could work like a plug-in system of somehow validated, trusted things. And I also, I think it was in one session that you could train your own models, and I didn't follow along all the details, but that you can use PyTorch and all of that. So I think this is also an interesting direction for the people that are totally into
Oh wow.
them stuff.
Yeah, so you think
Yeah,
that
go ahead,
opens
Gil.
the door for you to host your own AI extensions for for you to use on your iOS devices?
I'd be curious. I've played. There's an open source project called Ollama, Ollama, that will basically allow you to download and run models from Google, Microsoft, Facebook on your local device, and it basically exposes that as a server. And I've even done the thing where I've set that thing up on one device in the house, and there's a couple client apps for iOS out there that you can then point back to wherever your server endpoint is. So like, yeah, that might be something. I mean, Apple's not usually the type of company that likes to say, let's roll up your sleeves and set up a server and whatever else. But like, it's a possibility.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like the jailbreak days when you could run your own Siri server, or someone built that like open source Siri server that you could point your like iPhone 4 to. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, speaking of Siri, that was also an interesting. I feel like this is an era of everyone kind of, or maybe AI's kind of infused some new life into the voice assistant world. I feel like that was kind of dead on the vine for a while with Amazon, like basically killing off Alexa. It's interesting to see, like, okay, well now that it can actually be more intelligent and can integrate more deeply into, what you're trying to do on your phone. Like perhaps more people are going to interact with Siri. Also, they offered that you could text Siri, which I think is funny too.
That was interesting. I thought they had some sort of type into Siri feature before, but maybe this is a different take on that.
Yeah, I feel like they position Siri a bit more as like, it's not just a voice assistant. It's more like just an overall like AI powered OS like layer. Like, okay, you don't have to necessarily interact with the UI. You could just kind of interact like directly with this tool.
I liked I thought it was a great touch of, hey, if you're busy and you can't answer the phone, just shake your head. If you get your AirPods in or nod. It's kind of like just texting when you're on the train. Like, yeah, I can't take a call, but I'm going to text. But it's one step even further. Like I can't talk and I can't text back. Just do a subtle nod or shake. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, super cool.
And I like Horace Deju's long time ago, his kind of following the trajectory of how first we had the mouse as a different interface, and then touch, and then voice for Siri. So I guess the next would be like the shaking and you're nodding, the tapping with your fingertips,
right?
Just more ways to subtly interact with your device in whatever context is appropriate at the time is quite welcome.
Yeah.
How do you all, when you accidentally invoke Siri, how do you tell her to go away?
Yeah, are you polite to the AI or?
Well, like my dog's name is Harry, and sometimes I'll like be on a walk with Harry. I'll be listening to a podcast, and I'll say something like, "No, Harry," and she'll say, "What? No, not you. My dog, Harry, not Siri."
It's like, fine, texting everything to stop.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've largely turned off Siri in most places where it's easy to do so, just because I've never had a lot of, other than basically setting timers. I've not had a lot of use myself with it, and yeah, the false positives can be a little annoying sometimes. But I might, we might be time for another try with the, I'm very curious because my experience with using like large language model style AI is that it's pretty dang good at, I won't say comprehending language, but understanding the patterns in language and getting better signal out of that than, and I was joking with Gillen earlier in the day about, asking Siri to just handle fixing our DNS for us. And just imagining, that request and saying, well, we're going to send you to web search has been the fallback for so many things. And the amount of times I've asked Siri, hey, Siri, set a timer for the pasta I'm cooking. And it goes, let me show you a web search.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what I want.
Heather is a librarian at DePaul University, and she's seen more faculty and students contact the library saying, hey, here's an article that I need. It's called XYZ. It's by this author and it's in this journal, and I can't find it, but I need it for my paper. And the author exists and the journal exists, but that article was hallucinated by
Wow.
the whatever AI they were using. And so at first it was like, oh my gosh, spin their wheels for hours looking for this and like, what's going on? And now like the pattern is, okay, well, how did you find this? Like, where did you, because if it's in a bibliography or like the end notes for a different article, okay, well, now let's try to find, where that came from. But if it's just from ChatGPT saying,
Right.
Here's a source, then it's like, okay, well, then you can step back and explain what's going on.
Yeah, like it may actually not exist is a possible answer. Whereas, yeah,
I've seen a couple
even,
cases with GitHub. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gillen.
Oh, I was gonna say, I don't know if you guys saw that a while back, or maybe last year. Some lawyer tried to use ChatGPT to write a legal brief, and it just wrote like legal citations that didn't exist, and the judge had to sort of throw it back in their face and say, like, this isn't real law. Like, what is this?
But it sounded plausible, right? Like it's that, sure.
And I think this is also like a classic example of new technology that looks a lot like something people are familiar with in terms of like a search engine, right? Like I'm used to going online, typing in a question and having Google spit me back real world examples that match my query. But then AI is just fundamentally something totally different. And so it doesn't surprise me that there's a bit of a like cognitive gap where it's like, what do you mean it made something up? Like that? It's generative AI, that's what it does. But
it literally tells you what you want. That's its entire job.
And Apple Intelligence is not going to like make up a phone number for a contact of someone like, hey, give me direction to Gillen's house, and just like, sure, this could be where Gillen lives, and take you,
right.
on maps somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah,
I've definitely had it with GitHub Copilot where it suggests functions or methods that whatever I'm working with doesn't actually have. It's like, oh, you want the sort alphabetically function. I'm like, oh, that sounds perfect. I'll use that. Oh, this doesn't exist. Great.
The Xcode stuff looked pretty amazing, where you type in like your comment about what you want this next thing to do, and it's like, okay, I'll write it for you. Wow, that's really
that was really cool. And also I don't think this was an AI tool, but the macros feature was really interesting too, where you could just kind of say like, make this async, and then it would just like embed that code, which you could view in a debugger or something. Like it wasn't try to make it not totally magic, but yeah, it's cool to see those improvements.
And I wonder if developers are more likely to ask their AI companion to write documentation or to write code based on their documentation, depending on what patterns they're using. Like, is it easier or more straightforward to describe what you want to do and then have the companion write the code? Or is it easier to write the code because you've been doing that and that's how your brain works, and then ask the companion to write documentation for other people to read?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely, I feel like, the most powerful use of AI that I've seen so far. Just like totally saving a whole class of work. And just I feel like it writes better documentation than I do because I'm just way too close to something. Sometimes I just don't describe things that would be really useful to describe, Yeah, I think that the app intents API, I don't know if that's totally new or if they've just expanded on it. They mentioned that in the keynote related to the improvements to Siri and Apple Intelligence, that like it seems like any third-party app can expose interfaces that then the AI features could use. So like Siri would understand intents from your app in a deeper way now, I suppose, than was possible before, which seemed interesting. I'm kind of curious like how powerful, or if we'll see kind of like a distinction between like first party capabilities that Apple has on their platform versus what they offer to third-party developers with AI. And I mean Apple Intelligence. This is going to get very confusing.
Well, I noticed in the keynote they used Superhuman as an example mail client a bunch of times, and I use it. I enjoy it, but I also like using Mail, and I'm guessing that the reason they did that is show, hey, this isn't just within that within Apple apps. It's like we've made it available to third-party developers so that, you know, whatever tool you're using, as long as it's on your Apple device, you're going to be safe and secure.
Right. Yeah, and I guess an element of this is also. Oh wait. Oh cool. Hey Tony.
Hey guys.
Welcome to the party.
Hey.
I was gonna say, I suppose another component of this is also like the whole personal context component, and like what data, you know, sharing your contacts or your, you know, photos with an app before, I feel like came with a certain measured amount of risk, but now that it's possible to be training an AI model somewhere on that data that you share, I suppose it heightens the concerns quite a bit. And like, it'll be curious to see like how much of that like third-party app data, like could my like Instagram behaviors now feed like my Apple Intelligence personal context so that it informs my relationship to my contacts or something. Like that could get really, really complicated.
I mean, wouldn't that depend on the developer implementing the intents, I think, right?
Yeah, and just like, but I guess on the Apple side, like how deep do those integrations go? Like would it scrape data out from the app itself, or yeah.
Sure.
Was there anything, Tony, that you saw yesterday that sparked your interest? Not to put you
Most of it, no, that's okay. Most of it was just surrounding the AI stuff, and I was kind of saddened that we don't really get to even test it in beta until the fall. I feel that, you know, even looking through the preview, there wasn't really too much new in the OS itself until you start activating a lot of the AI features. So that's probably going to be the defining feature for this go round.
Yeah, true. And then for iOS, it was like iPhone 15 was the only model that supported it or something. It's like, go buy a new iPhone. It was the not so subtle message there.
And I think also outside of the US, it will come even later. So that's...
Yeah, because it only supports English right now, right? Or at least the Siri components were English only or something.
I think it's less the language, because others manage that as well. It's more like legal.
Oh, okay.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. How does like GDPR apply to the private cloud compute? Right? It's like, it's gonna be a lot to sort through.
I think people at Apple have considered that, so it's in the overall plan. But yeah. I think it's more this follow along, like you know, the chain of trust. You know, if the from Apple connects to OpenAI and all of that, this is I mean, in terms of that perspective, it's a little mess, and maybe those features will not come to Europe. I don't know. But
I thought it was really interesting, the list and order of countries for Apple Vision Pro being available. China mainland, Hong Kong, Japan, and Singapore can pre-order June 13th. And then Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and the UK on June 28th. That's an interesting order.
You think that's like supply chain, or is it more like local laws and, you know, legal requirements? I could imagine China being on the first available list for anything hardware wise, but
yeah, it took a really long time before DEP was available in mainland China.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I went to deliver a class in 2019, and we were using DEP before it was available, and people were like, "What are we doing?" I'm like, I don't, I have no idea when it's going to be available, but when it does become available, we want to be ready. And shortly afterwards, it was available.
Yeah,
in mainland China.
It's gonna be great, guys. You're not gonna believe it. Game changing.
I was also thinking sort of supply chain stuff, but the Canada part of it kind of throws me off on that, right?
Mm.
If it's available in the US, you'd think Canada would be one of the first, the next tier, in addition to China, right?
Right.
But I don't know.
I mean, they both start with C.
It's certainly not alphabetical.
Right.
I guess I wonder, because you said this was the Vision Pro distribution. I wonder if there's like, are there more stringent laws affecting like AR technology or just like things with cameras in markets outside of the US? I mean, we live in US is pretty fast and loose with any new technology. we'll regulate it later, but maybe Canada beat us to the punch on that.
It's entirely possible. It's also based on where the apps are coming from. Developer access and things like that.
Oh yeah, it's fair.
Things like Apple Business Manager available in the US first. I didn't hear anything about Apple Business Essentials being available outside of the US yet. I mean, I expect that eventually it will be, but it's probably not a keynote worthy. It didn't make it into the keynote for this year.
We did see, I know that this is something that you've all been eagerly waiting for, but now you can add Apple Vision Pro in the Apple Business Manager. So it's DEP available for
dozens of people were excited about that announcement.
I really want to see the first business use case for,
Was that announcement Vision Pro is automated into Apple Business Manager, or do you still have to manually do it?
So it'll be available just like any other thing if it's purchased directly from Apple or a third party that's registered.
For Vision OS 2.0.
Yeah. So
for right now, you have to use either account-driven device enrollment or account-driven user enrollment to get your Apple Vision Pro into an MDM solution. So yeah, we were at Kanji. We were super excited to see that it's available through regular old AVM and Apple School Manager.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think all of the devices need to be there. I mean, to me, that's almost table stakes. And whether there's a business case for it or not, like if it can be managed by anything, it should be in there.
Well, and I think it's more likely that businesses are going to be the ones that purchase the Apple Vision Pro to let their developers try it out and test it out, rather than an independent, because that's a significant investment, and it's the first version technology, and it's only going to get better, and probably the price is going to. I mean, I would imagine that the price is going to come down a little bit, but who knows? But yeah, so if a business is investing in that, it only makes sense for them to say, all right, this is a corporate owned, organizationally owned device. Let's get it into management.
Yep, and that's kind of where I was going with that. I know that one of the executives in my company went and bought one personally, probably day one.
There you go.
To test it out on the planes and things like that for privacy's sake. For IP and like with the mindset of like, is this something that we want to invest in for all of our executives just for that, you don't want IP leaking out on the airplane type of scenario.
It's sort of like the cone of silence you just put on your vision.
And I haven't heard anything since then, but right. Like if something actually comes of that, right, I want to be able to manage them. So
very fair, especially if it's specifically for looking at IP. It's like the most sensitive data. I sort of wonder, like, if we'll start to see, like, in the vision or like that AR product line, sort of like a lighter weight versions of the product specifically for that. I feel like this is such a one size fits all product right now that you can play games, you can do AR social experiences, and but if there's sort of like, I just want to be able to privately read documents or watch a movie, if there's sort of like hardware that's slimmer and smaller and just optimized for that, that'd be interesting. I could see.
I don't need the full immersive like look around, and I just need to be able to look at something and no one know what I'm looking at.
And even the technology of like, I have my actual eyes on a 3D lenticular screen in front of I mean, that's an incredible engineering accomplishment, but I could definitely see people saying like, I'll pay X number of dollars less to just have something that looks like a pair of sunglasses or whatever, whatever form factor is possible.
I mean, the big wide screen, that's pretty appealing, I gotta say, on its own.
Yeah.
I mean, freeform suddenly makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like do freeform with that, like just all over, like an infinite whiteboard. Wow, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, the demos that I've seen of the sort of like virtual avatars that then can kind of be in your space are pretty cool, in the sense that like people's voices are coming from where they're standing, and you can kind of move around relative to the other person that you're interacting with. So that it sort of takes that kind of virtual co-working thing to another level. I don't think it's going to replace team offsites, but but maybe it's better than a Zoom call.
It is funny to hear leadership get interested in security measures that involve buying shiny toys versus the other security measures that they're usually not so enthusiastic about.
Yeah, we got to test this on the real hardware.
Like a privacy shield for your MacBook Pro.
Or just like, SSO logins, MFA, things like that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe we'll have a little open competition. Who gets to write the first MDM profile policy for Vision Pro headsets gets a prize. Yeah, Scott, did you see anything? We were kind of going around earlier. Was there anything in the keynote that jumped out at you?
Oh man, I'm probably going to say something someone else did. I got a phone call just as this was starting. I didn't get a chance to.
Oh yeah, right
on. Let me think. Yes and no. Like there's a lot of little things that I think are going to be good improvements, and a lot of it with things like the tapbacks and scheduling messages and little things. I'm a big fan of those smaller adjustments.
Totally.
But I'm actually quite happy that was all it was. If that's the lack of big shiny new things for the MacAdmin is something I'm actually quite happy with this year. Yeah, there's quite a few more that weren't in the keynote. And since those are sort of NDA, I don't necessarily want to discuss them, but like there were other things that I wasn't expecting to see that we're going to have to deal with, but largely, I'm actually quite happy that this seems to be a relatively small incremental change. And that's the biggest surprise to me, I think, because we got that last year, and it's very, very seldom you get that 2 years in a row with Apple.
True. Yeah, if anything, we were sort of holding our breath for fundamental redesigns or some large hammer to drop in Sequoia.
And don't get me wrong, there's, I think, some places where that's needed, but at the same time, I'm happy that they're not. It's two ends of the same thing, though, right? I think the biggest thing that I was really excited about, though, is the iPhone mirroring.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was super curious to hear what you guys thought about that.
I've done my fair share of screen shares with a lightning cable, and that works well enough, but you kind of have to know to do that. It's not super intuitive and something that people just do. As soon as you see someone do it, you go, oh. You know, and I think, you know, I'd love to see that expanded, you know, to the Mac, right? Because that's the other, to me, that's actually harder to screen share. Screen sharing is a whole lot easier now with Sonoma, so that's less of an issue. But you know, that whole concept, right? You know, just wirelessly connecting to that other screen and being able to manipulate it from the Mac is something that's super cool to me.
Yeah, I feel like there's just on a technical note, I'm super curious how it's working on the back end, because the way they demoed it, it made it almost look like you were sort of running a virtual version of your phone because your actual hardware was still locked or displaying some other screen. So it was almost like it was emulating your phone somehow.
So they had it under the continuity brand, so, or whatever they call it, product, which is the same technology they're using for the Vision Pro on the you know, the Mac. I'm sure that's exactly what it is. It's just that same exact mechanism. What I didn't catch in the demo is how to initiate it. Looking away. So, and I don't know if they went into detail on that and how arduous that's going to be, but that's my concern. Right? If the barrier to get it connected is too high, then what are we even doing? But on the flip side, if it's too easy, right? You start, all of a sudden you're, you know, my webcam is now my phone instead of the camera in front of me, right? Like that has happened. They've kind of figured that out in a couple iterations, but you know, there's a balance.
I wonder if it's something. Okay. I wonder if it's something similar to how, like, the drag your mouse to the edge of the screen on your Mac and you can jump it over to an iPad and things like that. I wonder if it's using those same feature sets to try to kick it off.
Which makes me think it's all Apple ID or Apple account, whatever they're calling it.
I think that is a requirement that they say on the preview.
Because it pisses me off. Because most of the time I'm on machines that I'm not signed into where I would like to use the same mouse as a MacAdmin, right?
Yeah. All the more reason for enterprise managed Apple IDs now. I feel like that, and also what was that, Eric?
Apple account.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Apple ID.
It's rebranded.
Yep. It makes sense. It makes, I mean, it makes a lot more sense for it to be an account than an ID. But sorry to interrupt.
No. Yeah. Apple account. I mean, it has always sort of functioned, I feel like, I mean, as an Apple account, you know, bad branding.
I think that over time, this sells also better to the people who used to avoid going into managed Apple IDs. So it's just like, it's the same idea and it just rebranded. And now just like you can knock on the same door who said no last time. And now they say yes.
What do you mean? I have a corporate managed Google account and I have a corporate managed, you know, why would I not have an Apple account?
Yeah.
I am curious to see if I'm always very, because like, you know, on when you're running a managed like mobile device, like iOS and Android both have kind of a work mode, right, where you can both have it as a personal device and have kind of various methods, kind of like a work container, I think is the Android version, or that's sort of separation. I'm curious if we'll eventually see something like that on Mac OS as well, because I know for me, like, the whole thing Scott was talking about, where it's like I've got my work Apple ID or Apple account on this machine, and I've got my personal Apple account on this iPad over here, and like I sure would love to be able to continuity from one to the other. But if I am limited to having these two separate accounts on two separate devices, then that's just not you know, that doesn't go for me. If they could make it some means of having kind of a limited interaction there, I think that would make a lot of people happy.
Like a trust. Like,
Doesn't that kind of exist on the Mac, where you can be signed into a personal Apple account, and depending on how you enrolled into MDM, you can also have the managed Apple account on there as well, where at least the iCloud stuff is separated and segmented. MDM still has access to the whole Mac, but your
The
iCloud
experience is not great,
information.
is the bottom line, right? There's a lot of tools that are expecting a single one.
Yeah.
And there's things like the beta program that you can use a different account for. You can do a different account in the App Store and some things like that. But centrally managed, give me 2 accounts. The user enrollment on iOS is great, the way they handle that. And I would love it if they could just do that on macOS.
When they were demoing the screen mirroring with the phone, I immediately thought of the DLP vendors getting excited, just because, here comes my company files right onto my phone right here, just drag and drop it. And I imagined, like, if you had, separate personal and work accounts kind of coexisting somehow, you could say, oh, that's a personal account. You don't get to drag that on there. No.
Yeah, new data exfiltration risk.
You read my mind with a reason.
I mean, they're still called Apple ID for Sonoma, right? Team. It's just Apple account in the future, maybe. But I'm kind of shocked that I want to come back to what we're talking about. How it doesn't feel like a groundbreaking, like, new features in Sonoma. There's no public post in the MacAdmin Slack with the phrase "Snow Sonoma," and it kind of feels like, is Sequoia our Snow Sonoma? Is it our? I don't know. I think that remains
Hi Sonoma.
There was a conversation where someone mentioned how Apple, at least when we switched from cat names, Apple hasn't used, like, the same first letter of the OS from OS to OS. And once I saw Sonoma, I really thought more along the lines of when the iPhone 4S came out. It feels a lot like that, where it's the same thing, just nothing but improvements on what's already there, as opposed to redesigning everything.
right.
Like, you're saying, like, from Sonoma to Sequoia is like a
the S. Sonoma S.
We're also going from a whole region, like, to a specific thing, like a tree. Yeah.
I mean, they sort of did that with Sierra and High Sierra, right? Like, in that, I think they even. My memory is failing me, but I feel like they leaned into that a little bit, right? Like, this is an incremental on Sierra, so we're going to do that, right? I don't remember for sure if they did that.
I kind of want Snownoman to catch on.
And I just recall another thing that I haven't followed along because I was distracted, but the Apple Pay changes that you use the phone. It's more for the consumers, not of course, but everybody has an iPhone in his pocket, and so that the digital transaction over Apple Pay just, like, gets to a new level. So I have to look up the details, but
was it like peer-to-peer transfers?
Yeah, those things. And I mean, when I was recently on vacation, being in London and seeing the street musicians, they all have, like, a pay system because people don't have coins anymore.
Right. Yeah, everyone's got a Cash App or a Venmo or a Zelle.
Yeah. I just hope it's cross-platform. If they can make that work with Android and Google Pay as well, I think it's a winner. If those two companies cannot work together on their wallets, right? It's only two. Then
isn't there a Samsung Pay or something like that?
Yes.
I don't have a Samsung phone.
Not
but
really. I mean, yes, and there's lots of other ones too, right? But those are the two main OS operators.
Yeah.
And if those two can't figure out their wallets and get them working together, like I fear for the 5 years from now, we've got two systems for everything. And getting any sort of buy-in on anything along those lines is.
I mean, I kind of doubt it will, because you look at who's Apple's customer, it's the end user. You look at who's Google's customer. For Google Pay, I don't know who the customer is for that.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. Once we get rid of the green text bubble, maybe we'll also I feel like that's the first hurdle to fall. Not that you get angry at your one Android friend in the group chat.
I mean, speaking of cross-platform, I was also interested that the Passwords app has Windows support. Now, it doesn't have Android support, but it does have Windows support. So that's that's something.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
it's a shocking admission from Craig right in the keynote.
I didn't hear that. Okay,
and it's available on Windows. Don't choke on those words as you say that.
I do want to follow up on the Snownoma. There are a bunch of people who've mentioned the word Snownoma.
Okay, there you go.
There's one Sonoma in Appleseed private channel. Patrick Gallagher, shout out to him. 8 months ago, called it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Shout out for sure. That was major trend forecasting.
Yep. I definitely want to go back to the passwords, because that's something that when it was mentioned, I was super into, but I haven't touched it. I haven't even launched it on my test machine yet, because it's one of those, philosophically, I struggle with. I don't like vendor lock-in, right? And I just said it a minute ago. You're getting the wallets to play together and things like that. And I'm torn on whether or not I want to embrace Apple's password manager, because I have a bunch of Android in my house. I have other, I've got other things. I'm not just Apple. But at the same time, I trust it more than Google, which is what I've currently have most of my passwords in, right? So I'm kind of torn. I'd love to hear from you guys what you think on that.
I think my first thought was like, okay, so we have managed Apple accounts now, right? And we have probably an increasing number of reasons why we'd want to have enterprise managed Apple accounts. It kind of seemed like perhaps this is a one password killer, like could we have an enterprise managed Apple account that then you could share passwords from the password app across your team, or these kind of like features. That was kind of my first thought, was like, are they going to go this route? Because I could see that being like a first party solution that we don't have to like bootstrap everyone with a password manager, to do their work. But
I felt that it was more of a more official first party password manager. I think a lot of organizations where they don't allow things like 1Password because it's cloud based don't really realize that you could have still just synced passwords to macOS itself through Safari offline without the iCloud keychain. And so I think that this will open up that conversation to say, we have an official option to save passwords on Mac now.
I noticed you smiling, Eric. Did you have some thoughts?
None that I can share right now.
None that can be. Yeah, okay, that's fair. I'm also curious to see how much adoption it gets, because I think that if it's just kind of a reskinning of the keychain app, then it's
Yeah, I think if it was just a reskinning of keychain access, that they wouldn't make as big of a deal. I don't think it would be included in the keynote and available on Windows. Did they say anything about like having a corporate vault, of making
I didn't hear anything about that. That was kind of what I was waiting for, to see if that was a feature. But
No,
I
but
would-
they did list the different things that would be in it, and it's essentially is keychain access, right? You know, with the exception of certificates.
mm-hmm.
So, you know, I've got an image here, you know, Wi-Fi passwords, app passwords, website passwords, verification codes, which I thought was interesting if it's going to do TOTP codes.
You could have done that before though through the Safari password manager.
Right, but that's Safari, that's not OS level.
True.
And
True.
that goes to your point, right? Shared passwords and then sign in with Apple, and most importantly, passkeys. And I don't know, were passkeys stored in Keychain Access? That's
those.
so maybe that's the underlying tech that is the cause for a new application. I don't know.
Keychain,
I haven't looked into it.
Access, just to like, because on my phone, I've just been using passwords a lot to like look up a Wi-Fi password. Well, that you can find that in Wi-Fi, but to look up passwords, and just recently started sharing passwords with iCloud, and that's really cool. Yeah, keychain access. Like I've got the muscle memory of keychain access just from years and years and years of using keychain access, but it's having a dedicated consumer friendly passwords app is super welcome. Really, I think that's gonna be big.
Yeah. And I will echo that. I know it sounded like I wasn't at first. Like having that there is definitely a win. I'm just not sure how I feel about it for myself, right?
Yeah, like personal use.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't currently in iOS you can sort of set your phone to be using Google as a key, like a native password store, right? So you can kind of turn off the like iOS keychain if you want.
Yeah, you can use any single vault, for lack of a better term, and iCloud keychain.
Okay.
You can. I didn't like the interface of having to choose one every single time, which one it was. So I ended up turning iCloud off. But you can do any single thing plus iCloud keychain.
Yeah. So I wonder if they'll continue to support that, or if there's kind of a move away from.
I think they'll continue to support it because that's how things like 1Password or Okta Personal or KeePass, all these other apps, Chrome, they all use that same mechanism. But you can only have one of those in addition to Apple.
Right.
Speaking of support, watch this segue. When I used to teach the macOS Support Essentials class, the number one question was, how do I disable keychain? Mac admins who have been frustrated by keychain problems. When people change the password or people reset someone else's password, the keychain was a source of frustration. And yeah, you all know the answer is, well, you don't turn off keychain.
Well, they were also all bound to the domain, to an Active Directory at the time too, which is why keychain was the source.
Even beyond binding to Active Directory. Yeah, but that was definitely part of the frustration. So it's really cool to see that evolve.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, even still, like autofill is the new version of that. Like we had that in recently, where it's like, please turn off, autofill passwords in Safari, and then it's like, as soon as we did that, it was like everyone came out of the woodworks. Like, you broke my workflow. Like, I need autofill enabled. I feel like that's the new battleground. Well, I think I'll stop the stream here at the 55-minute mark, because I feel like there's a few other less publicly available things to discuss. So everyone stick around. But for anyone on the stream, feel free to jump in Slack and we'll continue the conversation there. But